spotlight at the New York Stock Exchange ahead of the July 4th holiday. Good morning and welcome to NYSE TV Live. I'm Allison Cossack. Today is Wednesday, July 3rd, and we're coming to you from high above the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. In just about a half an hour, the U.S. Coast Guard will ring the opening bell and open up U.S. equity markets. We have plenty to get to on today's program, including the gift presentation in the boardroom and exclusive interviews with the men and women who serve and protect our country. But let's start simple. What does the Coast Guard do? Members of the Coast Guard answer this question in their own words. Check it out.
The Coast Guard enforces federal laws at sea, combating drug trafficking, illegal immigration, and violations of fisheries on U.S. waters and beyond.
We respond to emergencies at sea, rescuing mariners, aiding vessels, and providing disaster relief during times of crisis.
Prevention is a top priority. We ensure safety and environmental standards, inspect vessels, and manage ACE navigation to prevent accidents and environmental disasters.
We also have a crucial role in managing the marine transportation system by facilitating the safe and efficient movement of goods and people, supporting our nation's economy.
The Coast Guard safeguards critical infrastructure, ports and vessels from security threats, enhancing national security.
The Coast Guard is deployed around the globe in support of combatant commanders to protect the security of our nation far from U.S. soil.
For 233 years, your United States Coast Guard has protected America from threats delivered by the sea, has protected those on the sea, and protected the sea itself. Your Coast Guard ensures America's maritime safety, security, and economic prosperity.
Each day, more than 43,000 active duty Coast Guard, over 8,000 reservists, and 30,000 auxiliarists provide services covering almost 3.5 million square miles of the exclusive economic zones, and those are the zones where the U.S. and other coastal nations have jurisdiction over natural resources. Coast Guard crews conduct missions all over the world, ranging from counter-drug and migrant operations in the Caribbean to traversing the Panama Canal and the Northwest Passage. Here are some other fun facts about the U.S. Coast Guard. Listen to this. The Coast Guard was founded on August 4th, 1790, when President George Washington signed the Tariff Act. Written and submitted by Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, the act authorized the construction of 10 small ships called cutters under the control of the Treasury Department to enforce tariff and trade laws and to prevent smuggling. Next, the Coast Guard is one of the oldest organizations of the federal government. And until the Navy was established in 1798, it was the nation's only armed force afloat. And did you know it is the only one of the major military organizations that does not fall under the Department of Defense? Following the attacks on 9/11, the Coast Guard was transferred from the Department of Transportation to the newly created Department of Homeland Security, where it was the first agency under the umbrella department. However, in times of war or at the direction of the president, the Coast Guard serves as part of the Navy. The Coast Guard played a major role in keeping thousands of Americans safe during the September 11th attacks. The military branch says it directed the safe evacuation of over 500,000 people from Manhattan using hundreds of local ferries and commercial and private craft. The Coast Guard also claims this to be the largest maritime evacuation in recorded history and was conducted in under 8 hours with no lives lost. The U.S. Coast Guard isn't only busy during times of crisis, however. Some of the Coast Guard's achievements during an average day include deploying small boats for nearly 400 missions, aircraft flying 164 missions while logging over 320 hours, law enforcement teams boarding 144 vessels, and cutter and small boat crews and rescuing 14 illegal immigrants. Over a year, some of the Coast Guard's achievements include responding to nearly 20,000 search and rescue cases, saving over 3,500 lives, and more than $77 million in property. But that's not all. The Coast Guard also conducts over 1,400 boardings of vessels designated as posing a greater than normal risk to the United States and interdicting nearly 3,000 undocumented migrants attempting to illegally enter the U.S. The Coast Guard also says it removes 107 metric tons of cocaine bound toward the U.S. via the transit zone. In fact, it seizes one drug smuggling vessel every 5 days. Wow. For many, the journey to becoming a member of the Coast Guard, that begins at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. The institution, founded in 1876 and currently based in New London, Connecticut, grants Bachelor of Science degrees in one of 9 engineering or professional majors. Each year, approximately 200 graduates are commissioned as Coast Guard officers to help ensure the safety, security, and stewardship of our nation's waters. This isn't just college, it's college with a purpose.
The Coast Guard has provided safety and security for the American people. Americans are proud of their Coast Guard and every person who serves in this organization, whether in uniform or as a civilian, active duty, reserve, or auxiliary. Each member of the Coast Guard workforce, you are the heartbeat of the service. We will focus on mission excellence so you can continue to be brilliant at our core work. We will find the best ways to deploy our assets to meet global demand for the Coast Guard from the Arctic to Antarctica, throughout the world's oceans, the entire coastline and river systems of the United States. Advances in new technology, changes in the economy, an evolving geopolitical landscape means demand for Coast Guard missions have never been higher. You have answered the call to serve. We will be the Coast Guard where you can perform your best and bring your best to the potential that is this nation. We will make the transformation we need to keep pace with the changing world, while being guided by our core values of honor, respect, and devotion to duty. With pride in our long history and appreciation for the sense of belonging that we share in this service. The pace of change creates challenge, but it also creates opportunity. Today, we will advance the Coast Guard America needs for tomorrow. Tomorrow looks different, and so will we.
All right, I now want to toss it over to the NYSE Head of Corporate Affairs, Josh King. He'll continue today's coverage from the boardroom, and we're having a special show today. Tomorrow is the 4th of July, and we've got the Coast Guard Academy here. Let's go to the boardroom.
4th of July weekend to come. My name is Josh King. I am Head of Corporate Affairs here at the New York Stock Exchange. And on behalf of Lynn Martin, our president, John Tuttle, our vice chair, and all of my colleagues at the NYSE, we are honored to welcome our friends at the U.S. Coast Guard and Sector to New York to ring our opening bell to bring this $39 trillion marketplace to life right before the Independence Day weekend. Welcome, everybody. Captain Jonathan Andrechik, this may be your first visit to the NYSE as Captain of the Port of New York. Congratulations to you, sir, on your new assignment. We got to know your predecessor very well, Rear Admiral Zeta Marchant, the first African-American woman in the 233-year history of the Coast Guard to reach the rank of Admiral. Left the port in good hands. Congratulations to you all again. Semper Paratus, always ready. That's your motto. Right now, a hurricane is bearing down in the Caribbean. When Hurricane Harvey hit the Gulf Coast in 2017 as a Category 4 storm, packing sustained winds of 130 miles an hour, Captain, you directed the Coast Guard's response, helping to rescue more than 7,500 flood victims in Houston and its surrounding counties. Under your command now, 1,000 of the Coast Guard's personnel spread from Sandy Hook, New Jersey in the south to Saugerties in the north, where I was yesterday, where I'll be this afternoon. 6,000 square miles, including facilities and waterways, moving hundreds of billions of cargo and tens of millions of passengers annually. Captain, you and your team have your work cut out for you this 4th of July weekend. The July 4th weekend, immediately my thoughts travel to recreational experiences on rivers, lakes, and oceans throughout my life. Growing up outside of Boston, enjoying the summers on Cape Cod, the bounty of the National Seashore, places like Chatham, a place where on February 18th, 1952, In the midst of a ferocious gale, SS Pendleton, with 41 souls aboard, broke in two. Assistance rendered by Coast Guard motor vessel number 36,000, captained by boatswain's mate Bernard Weber from Station Chatham. Through the heroism of the 4 dispatched guardsmen, most of the Pendleton's crew was rescued, earning them the Gold Life-Saving Medal, surely some of the finest hours of the United States Coast Guard. But really, it's all in a day's work for the Coasties, right? Going back to your formation, August 4th, 1790, when President George Washington signed the Tariff Act on the recommendation of Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton. Two people, by the way, whose histories is deeply intertwined with this neighborhood on which we're sitting. You saw them on the video. Washington sworn in, 1789, at Federal Hall, right behind me. Alexander Hamilton, his first Secretary of the Treasury, brokering all those deals in those first crucial years of the administration, including the deal that happened in the room where it happened that would eventually move the capital of the United States, where it sat then in New York City, down to that swamp known as Washington, D.C. Speaking of Washington, D.C., that's where the Coast Guard is headquartered. Last year, I had a chance to spend a day with the men and women of Coast Guard Sector Miami Beach aboard its Sentinel-class cutter Kathleen Moore, named for the 72-year lighthouse keeper of Rock Harbor Light on Long Island Sound. I was sitting off the coast of Miami, watching training on interdiction and rescue from a 33-foot response boat and an MH-65 helicopter Dolphin, got a taste of each of the 11 missions of the U.S. Coast Guard. Maritime law enforcement, maritime response, maritime prevention, maritime transportation, system management, maritime security operations, and defense operations. When you look out at the recreational sailors and jet skiers enjoying a holiday weekend in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, you wonder, what are the bigger stakes involved? Why is everyone doing this? Well, first, certainly to ensure that everyone enjoys the weekend and gets back to shore safely. And in the fireworks display, there's a lot of boats out watching those fireworks. But think about if you draw larger circles beyond that, 2.5 million people employed by ocean-based tourism and recreation, about $66 billion in annual wages and $143 billion in U.S. gross domestic product. But beyond even that, 43,000 people of the United States Coast Guard, 8,000 reservists, 30,000 auxiliarists, safeguarding the movement of maritime commerce valued at over $5 trillion annually. And in a time of natural disaster, as happened here 23 years ago, September 11th, 2001, when all the bridges and tunnels to Manhattan were closed, Coast Guard personnel directed the safe evacuation of more than 500,000 people in just 8 hours, the largest maritime evacuation in recorded history. George Washington and Alexander Hamilton knew what they were doing 234 years ago when they signed the Tariff Act, authorized the construction of 10 Coast Guards under the control of the Treasury Department. From then to now, and through this coming holiday weekend, when stranded sailors and swimmers will surely issue a few distress calls, your fellow citizens have two words we have two words for your work above all others. For all of you in this room and for everyone who wears your uniform, thank you. Semper Paratus. Captain Andrechik, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
This is great. All right, good morning, everybody. Who's excited to open the bell? Ring the bell this morning? Yeah, open the bell. Yeah. Awesome. Such an honor to be here at the Stock Exchange this morning. Thank you, Josh, for hosting us here and highlighting the work of the United States Coast Guard here on the eve of our nation's 248th birthday. I want to give a special shout out to my fellow bell ringer, Lieutenant. Today is her last day as a lieutenant, Brianna Townsend, who's the commanding officer. Brianna is the commanding officer of the Coast Guard cutter Katherine Walker, stationed right here in Bayonne, New Jersey, and she will promote tomorrow on the 4th of July to Lieutenant Commander in the United States Coast Guard. So just, again, truly an honor to be here today on the eve of our nation's birthday, and just over a month away from what will be the 234th birthday of the United States Coast Guard on August 4th. And many people don't realize, but the Coast Guard was born right here in New York City. It was Alexander Hamilton who envisioned the Coast Guard in the Federalist paper, number 12, right, when he said that a few armed vessels stationed judiciously at the entrances of our ports might be, at a small expense, made useful sentinels of the law. And from that vision, right, was born the United States Coast Guard. And it was on August 4th, 1790, right here in New York, when Congress passed the Tariff Act that ultimately established the Revenue Marine, which consisted of 10 cutters at that time. And today, the Coast Guard, the United States Coast Guard, is deployed around the country and around the world to conduct the important work that we do in service to the nation. And that includes right here in New York City. So today, we're honored to have members of our Coast Guard units stationed here in the New York City region. Most people don't realize, but the Coast Guard here in New York is the largest active duty military component here in New York City. And we're proud to be here to do the work we do each day in service to the American public and in service to New York City and the region. It's incredible work our folks do every day, from life safety missions, search and rescue, to marine inspections, to port security, to law enforcement. We're out there each and every day on the water to get the mission done in service to the nation. And part of that mission includes safeguarding the United States maritime transportation system, which in total, right, moves $5.4 trillion in maritime commerce every year, including over $300 billion in commerce right here in the ports of New York and New Jersey. And many of those goods and commodities can be affiliated or tied back to companies that trade right here at the New York Stock Exchange.
Absolutely.
So we're just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to serve here in the New York City area. And to have the opportunity to be here today to open the markets is just tremendous. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize also our military families who are joining us here today, our Coast Guard spouses. And I'd like to give a special shout out to a special spouse who's here in the room today, who was selected as the 2024 Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year for the Coast Guard, Mrs. Shauna McQuaid. Congratulations. So it is no doubt that our families serve right alongside our service members each and every day, and the sacrifices they make to provide that love and support to our service members is incredible, and we could not do it without you. So thank you for being here with us today. Thank you once again to the Stock Exchange for hosting us and highlighting the Coast Guard. Let's go ahead and get this market open.
Brianna, come up. Before we head downstairs, Captain and Lieutenant and I will lead the procession downstairs. Everyone with a blue stripe on your badge, that means you will be on the bell podium with us. So we're going to exit out this door to our right. Follow us closely. Those on the floor will render a clap-on for us in recognition of the work that the Coast Guard does every day, Semper Paratus. We have a few traditions here. You saw a little bit of it on the video. I know that in the military world, occasionally people exchange challenge coins to represent the good work that each organization does, and to show that we are one and part of a family. We have here the mother of all challenge coins. This is the official medallion for Captain Jonathan Andrechik and Lieutenant Brianna Townsend, Commander, Sector New York, Captain of the Port of New York and New Jersey, opening bell ceremony, United States Coast Guard, July 3rd, 2024, and Lieutenant Brianna Townsend, Commanding Officer, USCGC, Katherine Walker.
Awesome.
Come on in. and because everyone here is part of this ceremony and part of this procession and serves as you do in the United States Coast Guard, a smaller version of the medallion for each of you, given to you by our team as you exit this door to our right. On the front of it, as the captain said, the buttonwood tree under which this stock exchange was founded May 17th, 1792. On the back of it, the facade of the New York Stock Exchange, opened 1903. 6 pillars on that facade stands for 6 things very important to us. Capital, getting the money to create the jobs that the Coast Guard protects. Opportunity, those jobs and what these companies represent to people. Innovation, so many of the things that come out of those factories and labs and what the 2,400 companies of the New York Stock Exchange does. Transparency, because to have an open exchange, you need to trust the other person trading with you. Technology, because we are in the 21st century, and this is very different than 1792. And community, because none of this works unless we are one great community. Business, civilian, military together. Thank you very much. Let's go ring this bell. Follow me.
All right, folks. Anyone with
a of our nation's birthday, I can't think of a more fitting ceremony there with the U.S. Coast Guard. Captain John Andrechik, captain of the Port of New York and New Jersey, and Brianna Townsend. She's the commanding officer of the U.S. Coast Guard, Katherine Walker. She's going to be promoted tomorrow, right on July 4th. She's being promoted to lieutenant commander. Of course, the Coast Guard, born right here in New York City, also very fitting on the eve of our nation's birthday. All right, switching gears, the New York Stock Exchange made news earlier this week when it reported an industry-leading $12 billion in IPO proceeds for the first half of 2024. The exchange has listed 7 of the 10 largest U.S. transactions so far this year, including the 2 biggest IPOs, Viking, which trades on the NYSE under the ticker symbol VIK, and Amer Sports, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange under ticker symbol AS. Meantime, tech companies such as Rubrik, ticker symbol RBRK, Reddit, ticker symbol RDDT, and Ibotta, ticker symbol IBTA, they headline the resurgence of tech IPOs. But this might be the wildest stat of all for you. The NYSE's 2024 IPO proceeds over the first half of 2024 exceeds the total amount of proceeds raised on the exchange in each of the past 2 years. Joining me now to talk more about all of this is Michael Harris, Global Head of Capital Markets for the New York Stock Exchange. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you believe has led to the resurgence in the IPO market so far this year, 2024, compared to previous years?
Well, I think first and foremost, you look at the secondary market, which is near an all-time high. So that's been driving, on one hand, we're in a backdrop with low volatility, a relatively favorable interest rate environment, and probably first and foremost is just a lot of cash that's been coming into the equity market. We've seen about $130 billion worth of equity inflows. So combine that with the IPO market as a whole has actually worked really well for investors. So you've seen of roughly about 100 transactions that have come to the marketplace, all but 4 have actually priced within the range or above the range. 80% of them are trading above their issue price, and the average return has been around 20%. So people that have put money to work have actually made quite a bit of money in this market. 7
of the 10 U.S. transactions, the biggest transactions. Actually, we're going to take a moment for a second and go down to the floor to some pictures. Is that right? And we have the procession up to the podium. Let's just watch. This is what's great about the NYSE TV Live is you get to see the behind the scenes of what happens here. nowhere else but here at NYSE TV. What you just saw were Captain John Andrechik, captain of the Port of New York, and Lieutenant Brianna Townsend walking through the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with a standing ovation as they walked up to the podium to sign this distinguished book. We are, of course, about 5 minutes away before the opening bell, and these are tradition here at the New York Stock Exchange. Let's watch and listen more. So we'll get back to what's going on the floor in just a moment. I want to get back to our interview here about the IPO market. 7 of the 10 largest U.S. transactions this year happened right here at the NYSE. Why are companies choosing to list their companies here?
Yeah, I mean, every company goes through their own calculus, but it generally falls within kind of 4 different areas. You know, you think about the IPO process. Obviously, it's a great opportunity for companies to debut themselves in the marketplace, but it's an enormous branding opportunity, a great visibility opportunity, and there's no probably better venue to do that than on the New York Stock Exchange. So that's one area. The other is that, you know, we offer best-in-class IR tools and services. So as companies continue their process of being a public company, we offer the best opportunity for them to be able to actually perform as a public company. The other element is our market makers obviously do a world-class job of being able to provide liquidity for investors, but also to provide information and services and data for companies to understand kind of how they perform in the marketplace. And then the last part is really the chance to be a part of just a world-class community and really being able to be with best-in-class peers and also to be able to connect with best-in-class peers as well.
Yeah, and it's not just IPOs. We've seen international companies like Dublin-based and FanDuel parent company Flutter make the NYSE its primary home, as well as a series of transfers and spin-offs. I'm curious, what opportunities is the exchange offering these already listed companies to make the move to the NYSE? Yeah,
you know, U.S. Companies obviously have found their homes at the New York Stock Exchange, but about 1/3 of our listings are actually from companies that are domiciled outside of the U.S. And for companies that are domiciled outside the U.S., probably first and foremost is the opportunity to get access to the deepest pool of liquidity. You know, the U.S. markets are about roughly 60% of the world's equity market. And so for companies that have some base of U.S. operations or are looking to expand into the U.S., there's no better way of doing that than having a NYSE listing. As you often think about, for companies that are looking to expand into the U.S., the other element is just being able to look at having the opportunity of potentially being included in an index as well. And the only way of being able to do that is really being able to have a NYSE listing, or at least having a U.S. listing as well.
All right, let's get out your crystal ball. What's the outlook for the year?
It's a very deep bench of potential issuers that are on the docket for the second half of the year, and also going into 2025. We're obviously looking at a number of different things in terms of the interest rate environment, macro news, and also the geopolitical outlook as well. But we see things as being actually fairly positive. Obviously, deep bench of issuers, a lot of people that want to go out in the marketplace in the second half of this year, and so we're kind of primed and looking forward to it.
And the cash on the sidelines, that's really burning a hole in a lot of companies' pockets. That has a lot to do with this too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. That, and combined with the fact that people have made money already in this marketplace, both in the primary market and also in the secondary market as well. So they want to put more money to work going forward.
Do elections play a role in this, the timing of that at all?
A bit. It kind of narrows a lot of the IPO windows in terms of the time periods at which companies can go forward. But generally what we see is a big pickup in activity after the election. But issuers are kind of calculating all of that, and it's really just a question of timing.
Michael Harris, thanks so much for your expertise. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And we are just seconds before the opening bell here at the New York Stock Exchange. Let's go watch it happen live.
Are we all ready?
Most people don't know that the Coast Guard's operating in the Middle East. We have over 300 men and women assigned to patrol forces Southwest Asia in the Kingdom of Bahrain. One of the key points of Patrol Forces Southwest Asia is to deter malign actors and counter violent extremist organizations through the interdiction activities of weapons, narcotics, explosives used to equip or fund terrorist organizations. We have the squadron of 6 fast response cutters, which are on the leading edge of operations.
The fast response cutter is an absolute game changer. They provide greater endurance, a larger crew, a more capable weapon system. They really allow us to get out to areas here in the region that we would not normally get the chance to operate in.
Since we've transitioned to the fast response cutter fleet, we've actually had 6 counter narcotics and 1 explosives interdiction.
Being able to do my first boarding out here and actually having drugs and me being the smallest person to actually be down there and put hands on first, it was exhilarating, exciting. I probably couldn't stop smiling the entire day and night.
Coasties are just wired for the interdiction mission, which makes us such a great fit for operations in the Middle East.
We have the opportunity to have real-life Dow that we can do scenario-based training on. We have a ship in the box to do our tactical movements throughout. It helps build interoperability between us and our partner nations.
When we come together, our ability to deter malign actors is that much more impressive and that much more powerful. Some of the finest members of this organization serve in this theater of operation, living daily a sacrifice that's it's not experienced by many of our workforce.
Knowing the contribution that I've made out here, definitely want to come back as an ME someday.
Every time we get the ship underway is an adventure.
I could not be more proud of the work that these men and women do out here, so far from home, so removed from their support network, yet so immersed in the success of not only the squadron, the organization, but just the national security objectives that are imperative to the United States.
When we're out here and you're wondering if you made the right decision to leave your family for a year, and then you get back and see them and you see that love that they have for you, I think it makes you appreciate what you've done. And for me, seeing my family when I come back home, it makes everything that I just did worth it.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Michael Rankin. He's the Senior Market Strategist for the NYSE. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we watched the S&P 500 close above 5,500 for the first time ever. This happening yesterday. What has investors so bullish?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had markets rallying throughout the first half of this year, right? We've seen some bifurcation within those markets, but markets are getting, we're continuing to see kind of a very strong corporate earnings backdrop, right? And and markets are starting to sniff out the idea of the Federal Reserve starting to ease policy, kind of in potentially in Q4.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell yesterday mentioned the disinflationary path of economic data. What do you think Powell and the Fed ultimately need to see before pulling the trigger on actually making that first rate cut?
Yeah, so I mean, yesterday we did hear from Chair Powell at the Sintra conference, and his commentary was largely in line with what we've heard recently. But I would say it was a little bit on the dovish side of things, as he pointed out. He mentioned that we were back on this disinflationary path. He also pointed to the balanced risks of inflation and the labor market. Right, so I think that the Fed has kind of anchored markets at potentially at one cut this year. If you look at the summary of economic projections, right, they had the unemployment rate at the end of the year at 4%. Right, that's where we are currently, and they also had their PCE estimates that are higher than current levels. Right, so the bar is pretty low for them to begin this easing cycle. I do really think that the labor market is actually very key as we move forward here, because at this point, with how strong the labor market has been, there's really no sense of urgency for them to begin cutting rates. If we do start to see that start to turn a little more negative or moderate some more, right, I think that'll get the Federal Reserve to move a little bit faster.
Yeah, and speaking of the labor market, the next big economic piece of data we're getting is that June jobs report, which comes out Friday morning. What are investors pricing in for this? How are they looking at it? Yeah, so actually this morning we actually got the ADP job survey. That came in a touch light. We did also see the wages data within that moderate a little bit. And then this morning's continuing claims hit the highest level that we've seen since November of 2021, up over 1.85 million. So that's 4 consecutive weeks where we've been over 1.8 million, continuing to suggest that there is, some moderation in the labor market. As we look towards Friday, markets are looking for something kind of around 200,000. But one of the big topics that we've seen is the divide between the establishment survey, which is the non-farm payrolls, and the household survey, and which actually is the driver of unemployment. Right, so markets are looking for some moderation. We'll pay attention to the wages data, but it does seem like things are starting to slow down here. Talk me through what else investors are looking at ahead of the Fed's next policy decision at the end of the month. Yes. So, well, actually, I think there's an interesting piece of data out after the open today. So we have the ISM services number. We're going to be paying close attention to the prices paid within that. All right, and then as we move into next week, we're going to have the inflation data. We'll hear again from Chair Powell on Tuesday, and then he'll also be speaking after that inflation data. So by the time we get to January, right, we're going to have heard from him 2 or 3 more times, right? So it's really not going to be much of a surprise, But I think the other big thing from a market perspective, as we look forward, is the start of earnings season, right? So we do kick off earnings season next Friday with the major banks. Right, and then and that'll start to progress, a little more broadly over the following weeks. Recently we've seen some of the consumer-facing companies have some disappointing earnings and some commentary suggesting, that the consumer is, starting to pull back. Right, so that's going to be something to pay attention to as we sort of move into that earnings season period. Michael Rankin, thanks so much for your expertise. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. All right, let's go to a word from the U.S. Coast Guard.
This is the Coast Guard's 47-foot motor lifeboat, and this thing is a beast. It's used for rescuing people in some of the harshest weather conditions around the United States. It can operate in 20-foot breaking surf and up to 50-knot winds. But one of the most incredible aspects of this boat is if it gets overturned, it can actually flip itself back over.
The boat does a full 360 degrees underwater and pops back up. That ideally takes about 12 seconds.
But more impressive than the boat itself are the men and women who are trained to drive this boat through the surf. They're called surfmen, and they receive their training here at the Coast Guard's National Motor Lifeboat School. The school sits near the dreaded Columbia River Bar, an area so deadly it's known to mariners as the graveyard of the Pacific.
The Columbia River Bar is by far one of the most challenging bodies of water I've faced in my career.
Since 1792, approximately 2,000 ships have sunk in this area. But what makes the Columbia River Bar so dangerous? Strong westerly currents from the Columbia River rush out and collide with the currents from the Pacific Ocean, creating extremely dynamic conditions.
So you have 2 massive opposing forces hitting each other, to where it's creating an environment that you just really can't create in any other area of responsibility.
9 Coast Guard members from around the nation have come to the school to attend the Elite Surfman course.
The Surfman course is the culmination of years of a boat driver's career. It can take upwards of 6 years for a person to gain the experience that'll earn them that certification. So what we can offer them here is the opportunity to come and for 4 weeks of their life do nothing but drive in those conditions.
I wanted something with a little more drive and challenge.
They sort of tell you it's the highest qualification you can get as a bosun's mate, and that's what I wanted to do.
There's a little bit more layers than just driving a boat when you're talking about a surfman, especially in the Coast Guard. It's a lot of rich history behind it, a lot of great rescues. Hopefully I get to be part of a rescue someday that makes it down into history and keep bringing credit upon Coast Guard surfmen.
And welcome back to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Joining me now are Captain John Andrechik and Captain John Andrechik and Lieutenant Brianna Townsend. Captain, what an honor it was, right, to ring the opening bell. How significant a moment is this for you and the U.S. Coast Guard to ring the opening bell on the eve of the nation's birthday, July 4th?
Oh my gosh, Allison, yeah, just an incredible honor to be here representing the more than 57,000 active duty reserve and civilian members of the Coast Guard today. Just a tremendous honor to be here and an honor to do the work we do here in New York every day in service to the nation and the American people.
Lieutenant, you will be on patrol on the Hudson River, right? Providing base for safety and security operations during the July 4th fireworks show. Can you take viewers who are watching this show today through some of your primary responsibilities of the event, please?
Yes, ma'am. So we're definitely looking forward to being out there on the 4th tomorrow. We'll be making sure that all of the mariners, all the recreation vessels are safe throughout the evening and they're able to return home safely to their families that same day as well.
Captain, we understand that hundreds of billions of dollars are transported on the waters under your jurisdiction. How are you ensuring that the maritime transportation system is always operating smoothly?
Yeah, great question, Allison. Look, our Coast Guard men and women are out there every day on the water doing incredibly important missions like maintaining our waterways, the aids to navigation that mark those waterways, and then being available if something happens, right? To promptly respond and restore that marine transportation system that's so critical to our national economy.
Of course, Lieutenant, you're finishing up your second tour of duty as commander of a ship, which is a rare feat for any officer, much less being a female in a particularly male-dominated profession. What message do you have for women who are looking to join the Coast Guard?
Anything is possible. You know, if you put in the hard work, anything is possible and you can do it. Make sure that you have a good support system as well, and you'll be just fine.
That's great advice, certainly. Captain, your command sector, New York, is the biggest and most consequential Coast Guard command in the country. What are some new challenges you and your team are overcoming to protect the region?
Well, that's a great point. And, you know, one of the things that we deal with here in New York is a very busy and congested waterway, and it's a shared use waterway. You know, one of my jobs as the captain of the port is to ensure the safety, security, and environmental protection of that waterway each and every day, but also enable it to be used for commercial and recreational purposes, right? And so that increasing use of the waterway is a challenge that we face each and every day. But I'm incredibly proud of the team that we have here that helps enforce that safety, security, and environmental protection here in the port.
Lieutenant, before we go, we have to congratulate you on your promotion to Lieutenant Commander, which will officially take place tomorrow. Talk me through just how special this is for you.
It's such an honor, you know, to be here the day before I promote, and I'm so thankful for everyone that has helped me get to this point in my career so far.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Captain and Lieutenant, for joining us. Congratulations on that great honor of ringing the opening bell. Thanks for your time and thanks for your service.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to a U.S. Coast Guard video. And welcome back to NYSC TV Live. Joining me now is Commander Karen Evelyn. Thanks so much for coming down and talking with us. We understand that you have been part of the U.S. Coast Guard for 18 years. Wow. How meaningful is it to be here at the NYSC for the morning here, for the opening bell?
Hi, yeah, it's super meaningful. I mean, I run the command center here, and I think seeing how the critical role that we play in ensuring the maritime transportation, happens and the flow of commerce, like seeing it all come together with, many of these, businesses, and it's a great honor to be here.
It's amazing what the U.S. Coast Guard does, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Congratulations to your recent promotion to commander, and you were also made an honorary chief petty officer, so congratulations. Talk me through how special this was for you, especially as your dad was also a chief petty officer.
This is a huge honor. It was the same day I promoted to commander, which is also an honor, but really the chiefs are a backbone of our service. And the fact that my shipmates saw that I embodied those same characters and nominated me for this, it was such an honor, and I'm very thankful that they allowed me to be an honorary chief.
And next week, you're going to be leaving New York to become Deputy Chief of Public Affairs for the Coast Guard. What are you looking forward to most about this new role?
I think just kind of, changing the way we do things, being innovative and really just kind of pushing the Coast Guard out there in new territory and just really pushing our service really far.
Commander Evelyn, thanks so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And just want to take a look at the floor here on this special day, the eve of the nation's birthday. We've got the U.S. Coast Guard here at the NYSC. And joining me now is Petty Officer 3rd Class Jacob Brian Soltise. Thanks so much for taking time to talk with us. Can you talk our viewers through more about your role with the U.S. Coast Guard?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a bosun mate 3rd class. So what that means is I go out on the boats, work as a boat crew member. We also do vessel boardings, vessel security, helping people that are in distress, as well as navigating the boat.
How significant is it for you to be here at the NYSC as part of the celebration today?
It's very important. It's one of the things that brought me to the Coast Guard, all the great opportunities that are available to me. I'm very excited to be here.
Before you joined the Coast Guard, you were a middle and high school teacher in Florida, my home state. What made you want to join the Coast Guard?
Well, my 2 career goals had been to work in education and to work on boats. So I was excited and happy as a teacher, but I did want to try getting on the water, and I'm very excited with all the opportunities the Coast Guard has given me.
Living the dream.
Very much so.
Yeah, I read that you wanted to get in before you turned a certain age, and it wasn't allowed anymore.
Correct. Yes.
You timed it well. Well, congratulations, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's take another look at a live look at the trading floor before we go to our next video. Welcome back to NYSC TV Live. Joining me now is Lieutenant Junior Grade Michael Barth. Thanks so much for talking with us today.
Absolutely.
In addition to the Coast Guard, you also work for J.P. Morgan. This is very unusual in my opinion. Why did you choose to serve in addition to the career you're making on Wall Street? And how do you fit all this in time-wise?
Absolutely. So I would say service really is in my DNA. Both of my grandfathers were Army in World War II. Also, my grandmother served as an officer in World War II as well, and I had great uncles who served. So hearing their stories was really inspiring to me. And I wanted to serve in the Coast Guard given its heavy humanitarian emphasis as well as its law enforcement emphasis. And in terms of how I juggle it, I would say a lot of coffee.
That's a good way to do it. What would you say is the biggest challenge when it comes to juggling, though, both of those roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the biggest challenges is also something I find really rewarding, and it's in our motto, Semper Paratus, right? Always ready. you're always ready to go, whether it's to deploy. I was just the Francis Scott Key Bridge response. I deployed to Operation Vigilant Sentry last year. So being ready to pretty much leave a project, potentially leave things on the table, pass that off to the team, pretty much pack your sea bag and go is one of the difficulties, but again, something that I find extremely rewarding.
What advice do you have for other guardsmen who are looking to elevate their career both with and outside the U.S. Coast Guard?
I would say there's such a breadth of opportunity within the Coast Guard, so many collateral duties and education opportunities. So go take advantage of those opportunities, deploy when you can, take on roles that you might not think you'd be interested in to see what you might be interested in on the civilian side if you are looking to transition from active duty.
All right, well, thanks so much for your service and thanks for talking with us.
Thank you so much.
All right, I want to show you this latest U.S. Coast Guard video. Take a look. And welcome back to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Joining me now is the NYSE Head of Corporate Affairs, Josh King. I love it when you join us because we get such great perspective from you. Talk me through how significant it is for the New York Stock Exchange to celebrate with the men and women who protect and serve our country.
Well, thanks, Allison. I mean, you heard it from so many people that you talked to today, the captain and the lieutenant, all the other guardsmen that you talked to. You know, right now, we are covering the world of finance on NYSE TV Live, but there's a hurricane bearing down in the Caribbean, Hurricane Beryl. And at this very moment, Coast Guardsmen are making preparations to safeguard American facilities, American people. I talked up in the boardroom about that evacuation of all the people in Houston after Hurricane Harvey, what the Coast Guard did right here in this neighborhood after 9/11. 500,000 people safely evacuated when all the bridges and tunnels were closed. But the bigger issue that I talked about, which I think I heard Captain Andrechik tell you, was that this whole idea of a revenue service, revenue cutters, came about in the very same group of thoughts that brought the New York Stock Exchange to life 232 years ago, which is we need orderly and efficient markets. We need to be, we're a young country. We need to be able to trade with other countries. We can't have piracy. We can't have threats to our ports. And so Alexander Hamilton, in addition to all of these other great things that he did, said, oh yeah, Mr. President Washington, can you also sign this thing called the Tariff Act, which is going to authorize the construction of 10 little boats, we're going to call them cutters, to guard the Port of Boston, the Port of New York, the Port of Philadelphia, the Port of Charleston, the Port of Savannah. And that is an endemic part of what brought our democracy to life. The idea that a ship laden with goods, either departing here for Europe or coming in here to trade, was going to be safe in our harbors. That's what the Coast Guard does in a way that is not recognized every day. Of course, we're going to recognize tomorrow night, while there's a barge that's going to shoot off fireworks all over the Hudson River, that the Coast Guard is going to keep a safe perimeter and keep everybody safe. But the very flow of that $50 trillion of commerce in and out of our ports, that's what we thank the Coast Guard for.
And thanks so much for that perspective. You know, the Exchange plays host to the U.S. military as well as organizations who make a difference in America and all over the world. What is it about being here at the NYSE, that brings more significance of these types of events?
Well, I think, you know, if you think back to, so we had the Coast Guard today. I've hosted the Secretary of the Navy, Carlos Del Toro. We hosted the Chief of Staff of the Army, Randy George. We've had the representatives of the Air Force. We have the Marines every year on their birthday. The one abiding document that all of them serve, that allows us as Americans to think of the freedoms and liberties that we're going to enjoy and celebrate tomorrow on July 4th, is the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution, that single document, is what allows the New York Stock Exchange and its listed 2,400 listed companies to flourish. So every day, while we host military 5-10 times a year. We could host them every day of the year because of the incredibly important and non-negotiable role that they play in safeguarding American democracy, American freedom, and American values, which allows places like the New York Stock Exchange to flourish.
You've given us so much to think about on the eve of our nation's birthday. Josh King, thanks so much.
Thank you much. Thanks, Allison.
All right, that'll do it for today's coverage. I'm Allison Cossack. I hope you have a great day and a great holiday.
Iconic brands speak for themselves. The strongest brands stand the test of time. We are so excited to welcome you to our community. Today is all about you.
We've never lost sight of what we're trying to do and deliver that mission.
Going through this experience with my partners and my families has been unbelievable.
We imagined something that didn't exist yet, and we believed that we could do it.
You're going to look back on this accomplishment as one of the finest you've ever done.
I want you to know that the best is yet to come.
Just a few minutes, we'll go downstairs to the legendary New York Stock Exchange trading floor to ring the opening bell. The history here, the tradition, it's just incredible for us to be at this moment.